Welcome to episode 2 of the Robot Report podcast, which brings conversations with robotics innovators straight to you. My name is Steve Crow, editor of the Robot Report. I'm joined, as always, by senior editor Eugene Demetri. Gino, they brought us back. We've been renewed, my friend, for another episode.
Amazing. I'm happy to be here, and I hope the listeners are looking forward to another great conversation.
Make sure you subscribe to the Robot Report podcast on SoundCloud. Right now, you can also catch the podcast on our YouTube channel, and we soon will be available anywhere you get your podcasts. And to stay updated on all the latest robotics news, please visit therobotreport.com. So, let's get right to it. We had a great conversation with Paolo Pirjanian. He's the founder and CEO of Embodied, which is developing the Moxie companion robot, which is currently available for reserve, I guess I should say. And I know you wrote a great piece about Embodied on the Robot Report a couple of weeks ago. We've been covering these social robots or companion robots for some time. There's a tremendous amount of interest in them, but they've certainly had a hard time in recent years.
Yeah, a lot of social robots have fallen short because they promise to be all things to all people, right? They try to do too many things. What makes Moxie, which is Embodied's robot, a little different is that it's designed to educate kids. And so Paolo will go into why they chose the approach that they did and how they have served content and developed hardware and software to really meet that need.
A company will eventually get it right when it comes to building a companion robot. You and I, we've reported on many of those who have not been successful, but there are some major tech companies that are certainly intrigued by this field, and perhaps Embodied is that company that'll you know not only be successful from a product standpoint, but also build a sustainable business, right? I mean, that's what happened with Anki, is they just didn't have a sustainable business. So a little bit about Paolo first. He began his career at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He then created Evolution Robotics, which developed the Mint floor cleaning robot and various VSLAM and connectivity tools for robots. That was sold to iRobot in 2012 for $74 million. And then in 2015, Paolo started Evolution Robotics. So he's very well known throughout the robotics industry. So again, we had a great conversation with Paolo about the moonshot. Those are his words, the moonshot that it is developing the Moxie companion robot. So take a listen, enjoy. Doing research for the podcast, I know you sort of want to get back to helping people through robotics, right? I believe that's one of your main reasons for starting Embodied. But how did you arrive at social robots? How was social robots or companion robots? How was that the determination for you as to how you could help people through robotics?
Well, I've always had a keen interest in helping the younger people, and I still do that sort of on a day-to-day basis. Every time I have an opportunity to coach or guide or provide an opportunity for younger people. So that's been a passion of mine for a long time. And then my professional passion in robotics, of course, started at very early age. I was very early days start coding by myself, and also got super inspired by one of the Pixar animated shorts called Luxor Junior, which are something everyone is very iconic, with the two lamps that play around together. So that inspired me actually to go get my PhD in robotics. Before that, my parents had told me I should be a doctor. so, so eventually, as I got my PhD in robotics, I moved to the US to actually work at NASA, which was a childhood dream job, and I did research on Mars exploration rovers. And curiosity got the best of me, and I got approached by a dot-com billionaire, Bill Gross from Idea Lab in Pasadena, who enticed me to join him to start a company to become the Microsoft of robotics. This is, by the way, in year 2001, so way too early. But my curiosity was to learn about entrepreneurship with someone that had already been super successful. So that led me to then start Evolution Robotics. At the time, we were just basically learning to follow the money, because getting funding for robotics companies back then was very hard. Not many VCs interested in doing that. And we had developed this navigation technology, VSLAM, and wanted to find an application for it. And robotic floor care, due to iRobot, was now a existing market. We said, let's go build a robotic floor cleaner that is actually not random, but can systematically map the environment and clean every square inch of the floor. So we launched the Mint floor cleaner, and within a year went from zero to $25 million in revenue, which is why iRobot approached us to help merge the companies together and combine our technology with their business and product platform to uh, sort of further their leadership in the marketplace. Now we are in 2012 when that acquisition happened. I was the CTO and head of engineering at iRobot for 3 years. And then when I looked back and I said, okay, this was exciting. I learned a lot through the process, both in terms of technology, product development, entrepreneurship, and all that. Uh, but that was not the original thing that sparked my interest in robotics. I was not seeing myself being a floor care guy for most of my career. And so I talked to Colin and I said, I just want to leave and do something different, which was a very tough decision because I really enjoyed working with Colin and the iRobot team. But listen, life is too short. You got to do what you got to do. You want to be able to feel that you have fulfilled your dream. So I left iRobot to pursue what originally sparked my imagination, which was basically the combination of computing and the Pixar short animated movie. Um, and I went and did some research in that field. Originally, actually, I wanted to look at elderly care, which is the holy grail of robotics. You will find from talking to anyone with that background, but then found that children with social, emotional, developmental challenges actually need this more, and that's where we started.
You've worked with some great talent, obviously at NASA and iRobot, but also at Embodied, including USC's Maja Matarik and then Disney and Henson alumnus Craig Allen. How did you all come together? Because that's again a real powerhouse around what is still currently sort of a niche within robotics.
Yeah, no, it's actually I'm super blessed to have had the ability to assemble an awesome, phenomenal team together because uh, projects, moonshots like this do not happen on their own. You need to have a team that's super dedicated and passionate about what they do. So originally, when I was doing my research and understood that there is a need in the marketplace, also since I've been doing technology for 20 plus years in robotics and are very well aware of most of the things that are going on in this market, I was very well aware that the state of the art in 2016, when we started the company, of social robots being able to even engage or keep sustain the interest of the user for more than an hour was not uh, possible. That was the state of the art. So most of the products that have forayed into this market, including Anki's products and Jibo's product and Curie and so on, can maybe sustain the interest of the user for 10 to 20 to 30 minutes. So intuitively, I knew that content is going to be super important. It's almost the business you are in, or if you buy $1,000 beautiful high definition TV in your home and there was only one channel that played a program for an hour a day, it wouldn't justify the value of that TV, right? So you have to have content. And for the robot to be able to engage someone and sustain their interest for an extended period of time was super important. And so I went to Hollywood, and we live in the backyard here. So we're fortunate. I live in Glendale, which is home to Disney, Warner Brothers, and the likes. So I started, if this is before inception of the company, talking to people in that area. I said, I think content is going to be key. I mean, this is not only about technology. We want to actually have impact on children's lives. We got to sustain their interest long term. I believe content is going to be key to do that. Who better than Hollywood to know how to create content that's going to be engaging, especially for children? And through those conversations, I was introduced to Craig Allen, who is one of the best storytellers, as you mentioned, comes from Disney. Jim Henson. He actually also started his own video gaming studio that did the first Call of Duty, which was a smashing success. And that's one of the examples. And we have a team of like 55 people, and I can tell you 55 different stories about how we were able to attract people that loved our mission and loved our team and wanted to join us to help us make that a reality.
I'm a huge advocate of social robots or companion robots, whatever you want to call them. I appreciate the fact that you're so upfront about how challenging it is to build these things. I like the fact that you are calling it a moonshot, in that it is so difficult to pull off in an engaging way. Based off some of the companies that you mentioned, the Jibos, the Currys, the Ankis, was it challenging when you were going to investors trying to raise money? I believe you guys have raised around, was it 44 million you raised around this past March? You have some pretty heavy hitters as far as investors go: Toyota AI, Grisham, Intel. What was their feedback? I mean, I'm guessing that they're all for what you guys are doing, but what were there any challenges of? Did you have to convince them that yes, this is a moonshot, but we're the team that can finally figure this out?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for sure, there's many challenges with that. Um, and the good news is the following. As you are very well versed in this market, uh, successful consumer robotics companies, you can count on a couple of fingers, not even
Not
a
even.
hand, right?
Yeah.
So iRobot, obviously the biggest one, successful in consumer robotics, doing robotic floor care. And a much smaller success was my previous company, Evolution Robotics, that forayed into consumer robotics and did a great job and merged with iRobot and did even better. Nito, again in floor care, and so on. So fortunately, I was responsible for the creation and exit of Evolution Robotics, and then I was the CTO at iRobot. So it gave me a bit credibility to be able to attract investors. Although I'm telling you, I'm still raising money. You can ask any entrepreneur. It's never easy. You have to hear many no's before you hear the one yes. And all it takes is that one yes for you to be able to move to the next level. When I went out to raise money in April of 2016, um, it was challenging and super discouraging, by the way. You get to a point where you start believing that, oh, yeah, maybe this is too much of a moonshot. No one really believes that it can be pulled off. But we fortunately got enough investors that knew me and were willing to uh, make a small bet in the seed round. We raised $4.2 million in the seed round. Small bet, relatively speaking, for robotics, that's a very small bet, and see where it goes. And the rest is history. We were able to make a lot of progress with that first seed investment, build a team, build prototypes, start doing some trials with children and showing results, which led us to a Series A round in 2018 for $22 million, led by one of my former investors from Evolution Robotics, which is Calibrate Ventures in LA. That then led to another round we did just recently, just before the COVID, thank God, put together another round, and now we just announced our product. So the moonshot became a reality.
So, Paolo, you mentioned obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still on everyone's minds. Um, Obviously, you're already now Moxie is available for pre-order, and we'll get into the technology in a moment. But in terms of the timing, does the pandemic help or hurt uh, Moxie and Embodied? Because on the one hand, everyone's at home; they have to deal with their kids, and on the other, obviously, people are a little reluctant to take any financial risks right now.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, as you say. There are some potentially tailwinds and there are some headwinds that come with the COVID, but I'm sort of not deterred by that or not focused on that at all. Because since we have been developing this in the last 4+ years, I've been doing very deep user research and market research in understanding what we need to build for families to want this product to really address a clear need that people are dealing with. Which, by the way, if we go talk about why other social robotics companies have not been successful, is one of the main reasons is that they didn't have a clear purpose. It was technology for the sake of technology without clear purpose of what problem are we trying to solve here. So we understood the problem very well, and as a matter of fact, in my whole career, I've never seen such strong response to the value prop as I've seen with Moxie for helping children with social emotional development. And as a matter of fact, when we did online quantitative research on this, the response was so strong, we did not believe the results. We said, this is like, can't be, it's not possible. So one of the questions you usually ask on these surveys is your purchase intent. How likely are you to buy this product? And we got 75% were high likelihood to buy the product. And in my career, most products I've worked on, if they are scoring at around 30% in this kind of survey, you are sitting on gold. So 75% we thought is a false read. So we kept doing that research again, and we kept getting the same response. So the value prop that we have is super strong. And since we have announced, we have had phenomenal response to it, and it has further validated our research and assumptions going into this. So yes, could it be better if there was no COVID and there was no financial burden put on the society and unemployment and all that? Probably yes, but is it strong enough that the problem that we will be dealing with in the foreseeable future is going to be keeping up with the demand?
I kind of want to shift gears and get into the technology. So, can you, from a high level, what are some of the different technologies that are coming into play here for Moxie to help address the problem that you guys are coming after?
Well, I mean, Moxie is about socializing with children, right? I mean, even the general term of social robots is all about the social is the underlined word there. So you need to create a social interface where you can have the machine or the robot interact with you the way we interact with each other, using conversation, body language, eye contact, smiles, intonation of voice, and so on. Uh, and so to accomplish that, we really had to rethink and reinvent the way that is done. Because what had happened until recently was very impressive, and we are sort of using that, leveraging all the existing technologies to date, but we had to take it a few steps further to accomplish that goal of having a social interface, truly social interface. For instance, we have, thanks to Amazon for Alexa, they broke through in terms of having voice-enabled interfaces that actually work. We all have dealt with voice-enabled interfaces in the last 10, 15 years, probably in your in-car voice recognition system. By the time you were able to enter the address of the destination, you were at the destination, right? It was that cumbersome. So now with Alexa, you can actually speak to it. Sometimes you can whisper to it from across the room, and it gets you right most of the time. It's impressive. Then we went to social robots that start adopting that new technology, wave of technology, and saying, okay, now we can talk to robots. But then they were adopting the same interface that does not really, is not conducive for social interaction. You do not talk to each other by calling each other's name every time you want to say something. I don't say, Eugene, yes, Eugene, let me tell you this, Eugene, that's very socially awkward, right? And the reason we don't, because we have an ability to understand when you're going to be done with your sentence, when you're taking a pause. And if you're face to face, we can, with eye contact and nodding, we can signal to each other. There's a protocol of communication, and so we can take turns and volley back and forth. So that's one of the problems we solved in our Moxie, where you don't have to say Moxie every time you talk to Moxie. Moxie will listen to you patiently, wait for you to be done, and then jump in. Also, it doesn't pause too long before it says something, because a long pause can also be awkward in a social conversation. We
So
combine that. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I'm just interested. So how did you, it sounds like you're fusing together different types of sensor modalities, but how did you train that system, or how did it learn to, understand when someone is done speaking?
Well, we are analyzing the audio signals and looking at the content of the sentence as well, and predicting when the end of the sentence is going to happen. That's one signal. We are combining and fusing that with visual feedback and looking at the face of the child, and can tell whether the child is engaged with the robot and is continuing to have conversation, or whether the child is thinking and uh, about further thoughts, or is done speaking. And we fuse all of that information together to be able to do that. Again, it's not like the robot never makes mistakes. It does, like we do. Sometimes we can cut each other off, but as soon as that has happened, the robot realizes and pauses and apologizes and sort of holds back and says, sorry, go ahead and finish your thought. So these are all the mechanisms that go in there. And in addition, we had to combine that with things such as eye contact. So one of the first things you notice in most of the social robots that are in the market today, not most, pretty much all, is that if they have eyes, they have fake eyes, what we call faux eyes. So you have static plastic eyes with light rings around them, or other things that resemble eyes, but they are not really eyes. And the reason they don't put eyes on them is because it's really hard to live up to the responsibility of having eyes, because in a social conversation, eyes, you need to make eye contact. Because otherwise you look awkward. If you're looking away, you look like you're ignoring me. If you're looking slightly off, then it looks a bit uncanny. So when you put eyes, it comes with a responsibility of using the eyes in a way that feels natural and can build rapport and connection with the user. We put eyes on it. We knew that was taking on a responsibility, but we were not willing to cut that corner. And the other one is that most of the social robots you see in the market, they have a tablet attached to their chest. And that is due to the admission that the social conversational interface is not working. So you can revert to using an iPad to interact with me. And we decided that's not what we're going to do. We do not have any other interface than interacting with the robot with body language and speech. And even the face of the robot, we went with a display technology, but again, we did not want to compromise, and we put a curved display on the robot that is an expressive face, and it's only a face. It's not a touch screen. You cannot touch it, should not touch it. That's not a good social norm. And finally, we put arms on the robot for gesticulation, because it can underline conversation, to emphasize words, to point to each other, point to you, point to myself, and enhance the conversation. Again, when you put arms on the robot and you start pointing out into the thin air, or pointing to the wrong thing, it will come across as broken and wrong. So that comes with responsibility. So we had to completely reinvent every piece of the puzzle in terms of building a social interface that's using social cues the way we are used to.
And Paolo, I remember you did a demonstration for me remotely recently, and it was able to track my facial expressions, even though it was through a video screen, even though it was remote. And I can imagine the value that that would provide to a child who's in the same room and interacting with it. Looking at the software AI side of things, as well as the interface, can you give it a specific example of how Moxie, whether it's through lesson plans or through its interaction, could aid a child with social, cognitive, or emotional development?
Yes. So the content program for Moxie is designed around weekly themes that are themes that are useful for children to learn, and we use that as an opportunity to work on these social, emotional, and cognitive skills. Every day of the week is a new episode in that theme where we go deeper and deeper. And the other piece of this is that the content is designed to be fun and exciting activities for children so that they want to take that quote unquote pill. And it's infused with techniques from child development and therapy that are teaching children skills that they can use in their life. So, as an example, one of the first things we want to do is help children understand to parse and identify and label their emotions. When they're going through an emotional experience, for instance, frustration, we want them to be able to understand where that frustration is coming from and label it properly. So then once we have understanding of the emotions, then we can start going and working on techniques on how to manage your emotions. By the way, even as adults, sometimes we have a hard time understanding and dealing with emotions, but learning these skills from early age is going to be helpful, and many studies have shown it will provide for a happier life and more success in your career over the long run. So, at a high level, you can call these soft skills or EQ skills as opposed to IQ skills. Then we go progressively to more complex things like uh, relationships, friendship, making mistakes. How do you deal with making mistakes? And then empathy and theory of mind and more complex things. So every week there is a new theme. Uh, the reverse side of this is that Moxie is employing a lot of very sophisticated machine learning algorithms to extract information from all of the sensors we have, the audio, video, the verbal interaction, and so on, that allow us to track metrics as to how the child is doing on these various developmental skills. That information is used by the robot itself to understand what areas to focus on the most, where the child can benefit the best. And on the other hand, the metrics are digested in a easy to understand dashboard to the parents on an app, so the parent can keep track of and gain more insights into how their child is progressing.
It's like you're reading our mind. That was the next question that we were going to ask you, was about tracking a child's progress, but you answered it. So it Moxie literally adapts to what the child is maybe struggling with or is excelling at, and comes up with new content creations based on the progress.
Exactly, yes. So to give you an example, we have an activity class called Reading to Moxie, where actually the child is reading a book to Moxie. Moxie is aware of the story and can track, for instance, your vocabulary, your reading speed, your articulation, and then during the conversation, we use this notion of social stories to do various techniques of teaching children skills. One of them is called graded prompting, but in general, let's call it comprehension. So the robot will start talking about characters and their feelings in this context of this story. Like, this happened to this character. How do you think they felt? Or why do you think they did X, Y, and Z? And then, if the child is able to understand the context and the question that's being asked, they will give the answer and they're done. Like, okay, so we understand this child gets it. They are very scoring high on that. If a child is not able to give you the right answer off the bat, then we do graded prompting, which means we provide a couple of hints. We say, well, do you think it was because of this and that and that? And if they still cannot answer the question, then we provide more prompting. Uh, so on one hand, that prompting is allowing the child to start at a lower difficulty level. So we start scaffolding them to become more and more independent. On the other hand, the robot is actually testing the child in each of these interactions to know what their level is on that scale. So that is how we can measure it, as well as how the robot adapts itself to the child. And then so it will lower the difficulty level and start scaffolding, and then next time we'll go to higher difficulty level. And if the child does well, then it will go to higher difficulty level, and so on.
And so, Paolo, part of the challenge here is not just to have it interact with the child, but as you mentioned earlier, is creating the content to engage, obviously multiple users over a period of time. Can you? I know that you had loaded in like Encyclopedia Britannica, Webster's Dictionary, but can you talk a little bit about both the types of content that the experts that you're working with are making available through Moxie, but then also how that how Moxie is able to then tap into that for individual users?
Yeah, so the model we have chosen to take is that the content is all curated by us, at least for now. Because there is a huge responsibility with the mission we have for helping children with social and emotional development, we decided that we are not just going to open this up to third parties to put any content they want on the robot. So every bit of content is curated. We have a process in place where the designers of the content, led by Craig Allen, our Chief Creative Officer we were just talking about, will come up with a design direction. The designers will flesh that out. Child development experts will review it from a soundness perspective and add their perspective into how we can use this in terms of helping with the various skills that we are targeting. We have writers from publications for children with 30 plus years of experience that review every single word and sentence to make sure it's child appropriate. And then we go through a process of developing the content. We will test it with a lot of children and families that we have been recruiting over the last few years, and make sure that things are working out. Of course, every time you test, you have adjustments you make to those, and then you give it to you do over there updates to the families. So we have an entire team of people from this domain with expertise in child development, psychology, and publication for children and content for children that are building this content. In partnerships, we partnered, as you mentioned, with Encyclopedia Britannica and licensed from them a child-friendly dictionary. So Moxie understands the entire dictionary and has definitions of words in very child-friendly format, so that it's easy for them to understand. And we worked very closely with them to integrate this on the robot. It's also curated, and already Encyclopedia had curated the entire dictionary for children, so we know there are no negative things that can happen. And then as a fail-safe, the robot also has a negative list of things that it will never say nor talk about. So even if the child brings up uh, profanities and so on, the robot will just not respond to it.
Obviously, we've talked about this. You've called it a moonshot project a couple of times, but do you have a sense as to which part of this is more challenging? I mean, you're from a technical background. A lot of these technical challenges are difficult to solve and have it flow properly. But then on the other hand, designing the content to be optimized for the Moxie platform is also a challenge. Does one of those sort of stick out to you as being more of a key to this being a success than the other?
I think it's so many things, which is why this is a moonshot. The volume of work we have had to do is just huge. So from the hardware to the software to the content to the child development techniques and therapy techniques we use in this, to the parent app and cloud infrastructure and tools that allow our designers to develop content for a new medium, right? There are no tools for developing content for something like this. So the one thing is the volume of work. The other one is just the definition of what this product could be. And I liken it to, I'm not that I'm an artist by any means. I'm actually terrible at art. But if you wanted a artist to, let's say, create a art piece out of a block of wood, you give them a block of wood and say, just go carve your vision out of this. It could be an infinite number of things. And that's how we started. Like, we want to help children, but how? What does a robot look like? Does it have arms? Does it not have arms? Does it have eyes? Does it not have eyes? Does it have mobility? Does it not have mobility? If it has arms, what do the arms look like? If it has face, I mean, just like thousands of decisions just to carve out a sketch of what we want to do, and define what we want to do. And in doing so, you also have to define what you do not want to do. Like, for instance, we made a very clear choice early on. We do not want to be an Amazon Alexa type device. We are not going to tell the weather. We are not going to tell you what the stock price is. You cannot ask about clock. You are not going to set a sleeper timer for waking me up and all that. So many decisions we had to go through. And then it comes to the implementation. Still, one of the things that's always hard for consumer robotics is cost. As you know, many of the products that are in the market that have similar functionality cost in the order of $30,000-$40,000. When we set this out, we said in order to have impact, to pursue our mission, this has to be no more expensive than owning a smartphone. So we came up with a business model of similar to a smartphone. You buy the hardware plus you pay a similar fee for a subscription fee on a monthly basis. So cost is major. Rule of thumb. So let's say the hardware retail price was $1,000 and the subscription fee was about $50 a month, let's say, to use rough numbers. If you're selling the hardware at $1,000, rule of thumb for consumer robotics or consumer products in general is that the cost to us cannot be more than $200 if you want to have a viable business, meaning if you want to make any money to sustain the business. So if you have $200 budget to build a robot that has a battery that runs for 4 hours, has all the processing power for all the AI, which is the bleeding edge of AI in natural language processing, conversational AI, computer vision, and more, and you have motors for articulation and so on. So how much money do we allocate for the budget for the processing power of this robot, right? And we ended up with the answer is $10. If you look at companies like Jibo was using an NVIDIA Tegra GPU that's about $120. The processor alone would justify retailing Jibo at around $600 just to pay for the processor. So Jibo did a great job of getting the product to market that was very adorable and so on. They did not have the content and clear value prop, I think. But even if it had succeeded, they would have lost money for years to come because that was not the right price for the cost of just the processor. So the pricing constraint makes things 100 times more challenging if you want to deliver on a value prop, because people will buy this product at this price point, but they will not buy it at $20,000-$30,000.
Right. Yeah, and so it's what? Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's $1,500 up. You can finance that, and then there's a monthly $60 charge for the content that you guys are creating. And some people might say that that is expensive up front, right? But you hit the nail on the head. Is you guys have to be able to run a viable business, right? And
Yeah.
you mentioned Jibo. You look at Anki, right? We reported a lot about what happened with Anki, and that was, from my understanding, was one of their major problems is they just didn't charge enough for their robots or their robot toys, whatever you want to call them. If you take they were in downtown San Francisco, very expensive real estate. All of these technical skills and abilities that roboticists have don't come at a low cost. So you add all those things up, and I think their products, let's say they're $150 give or take, just wasn't enough with their burn rate and the real estate and all that stuff. And they just couldn't ever create a viable business, which, it sounds like you guys have done your due diligence to ensure that you have a viable business plan.
Right. And Steve, just to clarify, so we have in our announcement of 3 weeks ago, we have a promotional offer right now, which is $1,499, which includes 1 year of the service, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
families who buy it will not have to pay the $59 monthly fee until after the first year is over. And if they want to continue their service, they will pay the $59 a month service fee. And what the service fee includes, by the way, we have not talked about this much. It's in our website, but not on the front page. Just to clarify this. So the service fee includes the operational cost of the robot, continuous updates on the content, so unlimited content. It's almost like getting new apps every month. So you'll have every month you will have another month of content, and you'll keep going on. We send a shippable package to the child every month. Every month, the child will receive a physical package from our company, which includes comic books and activities and drawing activities and so on that they can use to interact with Moxie to do more of these exercises. You get all of the analytics in the parent app, which costs money for us for operationally to do the analytics on it. And in the app, you also get tips from our child development experts as to other things you can do to improve your child's development in these areas. And then the child gets access to a web portal, which is called globalroboticslab.com, which is their way of getting a bit of reinforcement on what they're accomplishing, but also it taps into the world, the creative world that Moxie comes from, which is called the Global Robotics Lab, which is a lab where it's a fictitious word for children that Craig has created, which is a lab where they're trying to create robots to become better friends to humans. And Moxie is a secret project where they realize the only way to do that is by learning from children how to become a better friend to humans. And Moxie is a special project on a mission to learn from children how to become better friends. So that is the background story. So there's also online activities and other content over there that parents can print for the child to do with Moxie. So you're getting a lot for your $59 a month.
Yeah, and these monthly subscriptions are great, to be honest. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and we subscribe to several of them, science kits and STEM subscription boxes, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot that goes into creating that, and I know there's a lot of folks who are happy to pay for that if it's an engaging experience, which it certainly sounds like you guys are creating.
Absolutely. And the other aspect is this: if I have to, for whatever reason, maybe I feel uh, demotivated or depressed, or maybe my child does because of whatever circumstance, pressures of school, bullying, online bullying, and so on. In California, cost of therapy is somewhere between $300 to $600 per session. 2 sessions, you have paid for Moxie.
Wow, that's an interesting comparison. Um, and there's never enough healthcare or mental health care personnel to serve the needs of the public. And so, obviously, we're not saying that this is a replacement for people, but it certainly, as an assistant, is something that, as you said, the price can be justified given the nature of the interactions.
Exactly. And as you said, and there is a shortage. I mean, before the COVID, now, as a matter of fact, I think a lot of the clinicians are have a hard time because people do not want to have social contact. But before then, even if you wanted to go see a professional for any reason, you would have to be in a waiting list for 6 months plus.
Paolo, we talked about serving children with special needs, but also serving just regular kids with their development. Tell me a little bit about the feedback that you got during testing and development of Moxie.
Absolutely. So you're right. When we originally actually started this company, we started interviewing families who have children with various neurodevelopmental challenges, ranging from depression, stress, anxiety, autism spectrum, and so on. But then we quickly learned by talking to these families that actually every child could benefit from it, because a lot of these families obviously have children that are also neurotypical. And they led us to saying, well, our other child can benefit from this. And then we did market research and found, as a matter of fact, yes, there's both a need and interest by the parents for that. So in terms of impressions, I remember a couple of ones from very early days when we had our first prototype of Moxie built, which still did not have all of the AI that took an additional 4 years to develop. We were doing Wizard of Ozing of the robot, so remotely we could trigger reactions and interactions through a tablet interface. So we had one of our child development experts controlling Moxie remotely by looking at what child was saying, and then she would just trigger the right response, and the child felt that this is the robot responding to them. So we actually worked with a family who had a boy on the spectrum, and that was the first ever interaction. Super smart kid, uh, highly intelligent. He actually challenged me on a number of quizzes that I failed, but he was not good at socializing with other children. And when we went home to do this test, it took 5 minutes before this boy started talking to Moxie as if he's talking to a friend. And without, I mean, I was standing there and I'm not an expert in any of these disorders. I was like asking mom, I said, I don't see any, I mean, he's like a typical neurotypical child. She says, and she had tear in her eyes, by the way, when that happened. And she pulled me to the side and said, it takes me hours to bring that out of him.
Mm.
The way she described that, it takes every time he comes back from school, it takes me hours to find him, was the quote to quote her. And she was just blown away by that. Another one was a 4-year-old boy that came to our office to do the interaction. And again, we were still doing Wizard of Oz at the time. And the parents on the first day said, yeah, he has a hard time socializing with our children. It's really difficult. And I've been going to get help, and he hasn't really changed anything, and so on. So one of the content, and actually, this child was the inspiration for this content model that we came up with, which we call daily missions, where Moxie will ask the child if they will accept a mission, and it will give them a mission to do in the real world, because we want them to succeed in the real world. We don't want them to be really good at interacting with Moxie. We want them to be really good at interacting with other children. So we got inspired by this for that. So this child could not, and so Moxie started talking about the value of friendships, and who is your favorite person at school, and then start talking to them about techniques of how to open up conversations about favorite topics, like your favorite movie at the time was Star Wars, and so on. And then Moxie asked, I have a mission for you. Are you willing to accept my mission? And the child said, yes. And Moxie said, so I want you to go and talk to like 3 people in your school about your favorite movie, and ask them about their favorite movie, and come and tell me about it. And the child said, okay. So off they went. 2 days later, they came back for the next session, and the parents were just blown away. They're like, he is like a soldier on a mission, out there trying really hard to get attention of other children, to have a conversation with them. And that was where the notion of these daily missions was born, and is part of every day. Every day, Moxie has a mission for a child. And then on the third day, when they came back, we saw also something that was also eye-opening for us, which was the child was constantly talking about Moxie. Like, he missed Moxie, and he really wanted Moxie to go home. And at the time, we had very few prototypes. We couldn't give it away, and nor did it have the AI to do the job. So we had to have Moxie tell him that his mission is to help him to become a better robot so he can become ready to be deployed in people's homes, basically. So with that conversation, he was okay with giving up the idea of having Moxie come home with him. So those were really inspiring moments for us. Those two, and we have had many more.
I want to ask you about the physical design of Moxie. I believe you worked with a design firm called Fuse Project, who you are pretty familiar with. They designed the mid floor cleaner, right?
Yeah.
You talked about it before. There's a lot, you got to choose to put into the robot. There's a lot you got to choose to not put into the robot from a physical standpoint. You know, can you two-part question, but was there any consideration to have wheels on Moxie, and just how many iterations did you go through to come up with this final design?
Yeah. Let me ask the latter part first.
Sure.
Definitely, given my background, obviously, robot was going to have wheels.
Yeah.
So that was the design. And within the first year, I came to the realization we do not have enough of bandwidth nor capital to do that. Although I've been doing navigation, I have 50 patents in Visual SLAM and other navigation technology. Roombas are all enabled by the technology that my team and I developed in my previous part of the career. So that was a no-brainer. But that was one consideration. We don't have the bandwidth and so on. Secondly, the cost, it would add more cost to the robot, right? It would add maybe a few hundred more dollars to the bill of material cost. Like a Roomba that does navigation. I mean, the high-end Roombas cost $1,500 to clean your floors. So when we talk about $1,500 for helping your child, it's a no-brainer, right?
It's a very
So
small.
right. So for those two reasons, we decide to drop that for now. Future generations, as we can reduce the cost and so on, or improve the value, we can obviously add mobility to the robot. Regarding Fuse project, yeah, I mean, Yves Behar and I have worked together now for more than 10 years. I was first introduced to him when we decided to do the Mint floor cleaner, and I wanted it to be different in every way, shape, and form. First, as I mentioned, the navigation technology was not random, but was mapping and systematic. Secondly, we wanted Mint to get into corners. Round shape is not great for floor cleaning. So you had to be square, but square navigation, square things was hard because of the technology and so on. The other part, we said we don't want to go for carpets, we want to go for hard floor cleaning, just to be sort of very complementary to iRobot. And the design, we asked Eve to look at the design for this. This was, I think, actually, Mint was probably Eve's first robotic project. And Eve came back shortly thereafter with like 4 or 5 concepts, and each looked more beautiful than the other. They were amazing, like simplistic design, captured the core essence of what we wanted to do, but made it beautiful. And so we did that. We designed that, and it was beautiful design. Won many awards for the design as well. And then later, when iRobot and us we joined forces, actually I introduced Eve to iRobot's design team, and he helped with actually the latest S9 series design of that, and changed the design language significantly compared to the design that iRobot had for many years. So obviously, when we wanted to do Moxie, I connected with Eve very early days. He said, "This is my project. You're not going to go work with anyone else." He just loves the mission so much. And I really like working with him. He has an amazing aesthetic sense. And within 5 minutes, he could see it, right? And so we had prototypes already. We had done a few iterations. And he took that and just elevated it, made it a lot more beautiful. There were constraints and so on that we had to work through together. So trade-offs between form and function. But we have done that in the past successfully, and we did it again here. As to your question about iterations, we have done many iterations, many iterations. This is very complex. So in terms of the hardware, form factor, we have gone through, I think, around 10 iterations to land on this one. And of course, the internals of it, we have gone through 40, 50 iterations on the hardware inside.
In terms of robotics, obviously, this has been a tough year for everyone across industries. But as you look ahead to the second half of 2020, what trends do you expect in the technology or in robotics in general?
Oh man, it's so hard to make predictions, but especially on such a small scale, like 6 months, super hard to say. If I had to make a guess, is that social isolation is validating or increasing the value of automation even more. So I think delivery and remote operation, logistics, even food preparation and so on are probably going to have some tailwinds because you do not want to have social contact. And robotics is obviously eliminating the need for social contact, and you can make it very sanitized, so there are no transfer of germs and all that. So I think that's going to give tailwinds for a lot of automation technologies in general. Uh, so that may be a good thing for robotics in general.
Paulo, we like to ask all of our guests some fun questions to get, we want to get to know Paulo, the person, not just the roboticist. So we're going to fire some fun questions at you.
Let's
Uh,
do it.
how many Roombas do you have?
Oh man, I have this one right here next to me. There is one I use in my display, and I have one that I use most of the time, and then one that's retired. So three.
Three. All right.
And I have three mints as well.
So your house must be very clean. Uh,
Especially in this time, it's actually we spend so much time at home. It's useful to use robots to clean the floors.
so in terms of spending all this time at home, what have you found is the best or worst aspects of that? Because obviously, if you work in technology, you are already able to work remotely, but there are some things that we're learning about our work styles that we might not have expected.
Yeah, so I think I'm probably primarily an introvert, so I I'm perfectly fine being locked in for a long period of time. The negative part may be that I'm also very passionate and obsessive about my project. So now I'm working 24/7. There is no break because there's no separation between home and work. It's all the same. The other positive, I think, is that it has brought families closer to each other. I think that's the silver lining, and it's giving us pause to think and rethink our values that our society has created for us. A lot of luxuries and flashy things that the society has sort of embraced are not necessary in life. We are going back to a little bit of the basics and so on. So I would like to think that we can reevaluate our values and norms in a society, but I'm afraid that it may snap back as soon as we have the opportunity to do that because it's just human nature. In terms of the team overall, we have an amazing team. I was fortunate enough that we have had 4 years to create an amazing team culture and team members that really like working with each other. They're passionate about a project and are very focused on this. So that has not caused an issue because we have a strong culture. But I do believe that people that are not like me, who are more of social animals and like to have face-to-face physical interaction, there are some people in the team obviously will take some. Or it's challenging for them to be locked in a home and not have the ability to interact in person. So there is obviously pros and cons to all of this. The worst one I think is the social sort of impact financially and mentally on the society overall, which I'm afraid will take years to overcome.
You said you're working 24/7. It's hard to separate life and work, but are you binge watching anything? Do you get to take a break and get your mind off things?
Sometimes I do, not enough. My son, which is again one of the nice things, is that my son, who has been to the university, is now home and studying from home, and we've spent a lot of time together. He's 20 years old. So my son had never watched HBO show Silicon Valley,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to inspire him about entrepreneurship. So we binge watched Silicon Valley together, which was fun. He got really stressed out, by the way. He said, "Is this true? Is this exaggerated?" I said, "No, actually, it's not very exaggerated. That's how it is."
Hey, it's worked out pretty well for dad, so he should. He's got a good mentor. He's got a good mentor.
Right. So, Paolo, what's your favorite robot, real or fictional? I know you've mentioned a couple of examples already, but what's your all-time favorite?
I think my all-time favorite robot is Mint in real world, and the fictional one, I think, Wally.
Why Wally?
Again, with Wally, I think it was this magic of being able to make emotional connection or elicit emotions in the audience with a robotic character that was not verbal but had enough expressiveness to touch touch us in many ways.
You're based around the LA area, Southern California area. Any celebrities that you've met? Who's the most famous person you've had an encounter with?
Actually, the most famous person I've had encounter with is Jeff Bezos, who is not from Hollywood, but I've had the opportunity of meeting him a few times in the sort of Southern California area. Uh, I think I've met celebrities, but I don't remember. I'm not that much into that celebrity thing, so I may not even know their names when I meet them.
Makes you a
Where-
good neighbor. That way you're not coughing at them when they happen to drive by or you run into them at the grocery store.
Right.
Paulo, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Paolo Pirjanian, founder and CEO of Embodied. Best of luck. We'll be following the progress of Moxie, and good luck with everything.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your podcast.
To learn more about the Moxie robot, check out Embodied's website at embodied.com. So, Gene, what stood out to you? What were some of the more interesting points that Paolo had to share?
Well, I think it's great to see that Embodied is working on a robot to really help children with developmental learning, whether it's emotional or social or cognitive. It's really interesting that they understand that it's not just about a cute hardware package, but really about an ongoing set of lesson plans. And so there's a reason why companies like Toyota AI Ventures have supported Embodied is that it has a clear sense of purpose. And unlike a lot of these other social robots that we've covered, they've been developing this quietly and steadily and not burning through capital in the hopes of a highly priced toy. And so I think that's really, just hearing him explain his approach and how he's taking the lessons that he's learned from his previous career at NASA and iRobot to the present, it was really enlightening.
The content creation, the ongoing content creation, they've obviously identified that as one of the keys to success early on in this process, right? So, Moxie can be reserved still at the moment, but behind the scenes, they've been working diligently to, create all this compelling content with, other stakeholders, other experts in childhood development. And, I don't know exactly how much they'll have ready to go or how much they'll be creating on an ongoing basis, but they've certainly brought on some key members to help them solve that issue.
Yeah, whether it's Encyclopedia Britannica or you're talking about dealing with educators or child therapists, that's really the key is having good content. It is absolutely important to have a pleasing physical form factor. It's important to have an AI interface that has that natural language interaction. But in the long run, to get that long term value especially for parents who are now having to homeschool their kids or trying to develop education programs for their children at home, that they understand all those different pieces, and it's a huge challenge. Even Paolo has said that it has taken him a lot of work to get to this point.
And I think he actually changed my tune on, I was sort of questioning the timing of, them launching or making the product available to be reserved with everything that's going on in the world, in regards to the coronavirus. But, the fact that everybody is home, right now, I mean, I know things are starting to open back up, but there's a lot of businesses that won't be opening back up, and work from home mandates are going to continue. Everybody's super busy at home if you have kids and you're still trying to juggle your job. So, I think actually it might not be a bad time for the product to hit the market. I mean, I know, you know, parents might just be looking for anything that could help, right?
Exactly. And again, the price point is not insignificant, but he compared it to owning a cell phone, but with obviously a different level of interactivity than a cell phone or a smartphone might have. And so, there is going to be that continuing pressure to get volume, to get the price down, but at the same time to increase the functionality. And that's where we're excited to follow the progress of Embodied and Moxie.
Do you have any Alexa devices or any smart speakers in your home?
I have a Google Home on one floor and a Amazon Alexa on another, and and I use them periodically, but it's also I am never very far, and you're a techie too. We're never very far from a screen or a keyboard or a device of one kind or another. I was telling someone I was backing up all my files in like 5 different devices recently, and the cloud. So I'm maybe not the typical person in that way, but parents are getting accustomed to the idea that we have generations now where as soon as they're able to hold a cell phone, they want a device. People are addicted to screens. Let's give them other ways of interacting with technology that help them and aren't just diversions.
So we have a bunch of Amazon Alexa products, and we really use it to play music, right, for the kids, or tell us a joke, or certain things like that. And really, I think it's kind of a limited interface, right? It's not a true,
Hmm.
sort of two-way interaction, right? And that's sort of the key, I think, for they can have, Embodied can have the greatest content in the world, they can have the greatest looking robot in the world. If it's not truly interactive and engaging, um, you hit it right on the head. These kids now, I have my 2-year-old knows how to use a cell phone just from watching us, right? And
Right.
she'll get a hold of our computer, and she'll think that she can, use her fingers to sort of zoom in and zoom out on the picture, and she, gets frustrated. So there's certain expectations from these young children about how these products should interact, right? Whether it's a movement standpoint, or especially with Moxie, with a conversational interaction. So that's, you know they developed their whole platform, to get that right, and hopefully, hopefully that works for them.
Yeah, and I mentioned that I was lucky enough to get a demo of Moxie. And even in just the past few years that we've been covering these kinds of robots, the level of human interaction has improved. That you don't need a command word for this particular robot, that it knows what it has already said to you or what you've already told it, and it can react accordingly. So if a child says, "No, I don't want to do this puzzle anymore," the robot reacts calmly and says, "Okay, let's try something else." And y- it takes parents a long time to develop that patience, but to have a robot that can work with a child, it's not a substitute for a teacher or a parent, but that can help in all that time in between, definitely is, I think, very exciting because, we're all concerned right now about kids just vegging out and losing years worth of schoolwork because they're not able to engage in a really inspiring way.
Yeah, so we wish Paolo and the entire Embodied team good luck with the development of Moxie, and you'll actually hear from Paolo. He's speaking at our Healthcare Robotics Engineering Forum, which is slated to run September 24th and 25th in Boston, Massachusetts. So you can learn more about the progression of Moxie later this year. And before we go, we have one programming note that we want to share with you folks. We have a special episode of the Robot Report podcast coming up next week. It'll be our RBR 50 version of the podcast. Gene, for those who might not be aware, do you want to share a little bit about the RBR 50 and what it is?
Sure. So for about a decade now, Robotics Business Review, which is a sister publication, has been calling out recognizing the most innovative, influential leaders in the robotics space across different verticals, and that's the RBR 50 list. And it is much anticipated. We typically get many more submissions than we can possibly squeeze into the list, but this year's RBR 50 list is really exciting because we've altered the criteria somewhat. We're really looking at innovation, at what are companies doing that's new? What are they doing that is changing how either business is done or technology is developed? How are they developing new business models, reaching out to new markets, developing new applications? And so we're excited to share that list with everyone. And we know the companies that are on that list are truly leaders in robotics.
The RBR 50 list itself actually launches on Monday morning. So if you want to check that out, just visit roboticsbusinessreview.com and you'll see all 50 companies and why they won, what they're doing, and why it is so innovative in the robotics community. So make sure to check us out next Wednesday for the next episode of the Robot Report podcast. You can also subscribe to it on SoundCloud and catch each episode on our YouTube channel. And again, we'll soon have all the episodes available anywhere you listen to your podcasts. To stay updated on all the latest robotics news, visit therobotreport.com. For Eugene Demetri, I'm Steve Crow. Stay healthy, everyone, and we'll talk to you again soon.